What is up, VR? Welcome to another Tuesday night live stream. If this is your first time tuning in, if you've never been to VR in the past, or if parents, this is your first live stream that you're watching, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jordan. I'm one of the youth ministers here at Vertical Reality. We just want to say thank you so much for tuning in, spending your Tuesday evening, spending your time with us. We really appreciate that. As far as news goes for VR, I don't have anything official to tell you, but all I'm going to say as a little teaser is make sure you're paying attention to Facebook, make sure you're paying attention to the Sunday morning live streams. There is a bomb of a news report that's about to come in as far as the return to Vertical Reality. So make sure you're paying attention because we are all very excited for the day when we get to come back to VR together and have normal services finally. But until then, we are going to be here with doing these Tuesday night live streams for at least a couple more weeks. The last couple weeks you've heard from Andrea, and then starting this week and for the next few weeks you'll be hearing from me because Andrea and Ronnie are actually getting married. So if you think of it, if you have Andrea's number, if you have Ronnie's number, just text them, tell them congratulations. We're super excited for them and all that God's about to do in their lives. So make sure you text them and give them a big old congratulations. But for tonight, I want to start off tonight's live stream by saying something a little bit controversial. And this opinion is a very hot topic for a lot of people. You know, there's a lot of people who have very passionate opinions about what I'm about to say. Whether you agree with me or you don't, you're either going to really agree with me or really disagree with me. Some of you might even shut the stream off as soon as you hear me say this because you can't believe that I feel this way. But there's no other way to say it, so I'm just going to come out and say it. Country music is amazing. There it is. I said it. And I mean it. Country music is amazing. If you agree with me, let's drop a yeehaw down in the chat below. And if you disagree with me, well, then don't say anything because you don't know what good music is. But I like country music. I think it's really good. My mom raised me on country music when I was a little kid. Not so much of a fan of the new stuff. I like more of the Kenny Chesney and the Tim McGraw of the old days. 90s, early 2000s country. That's what I like to listen to. But there is actually a new song by a guy named Billy Currington called Good Directions. And the song is about a beautiful city girl that gets lost out in the country. And I want to read you some of the lyrics from this song because it's going to lead us right into what we're going to talk about tonight. This is what the song Good Directions by Billy Currington, this is how it starts. It says, I was sitting there selling turnips on a flatbed truck, crunching on a pork rind when she pulled up. She had to be thinking, this is where rednecks come from. She had Hollywood written on her license plate. She was lost and looking for the interstate, needing directions, and I was the man for the job. I told her way up yonder past the caution light, there's a little country store with an old Coke sign. You gotta stop in and ask Miss Bell for some of her sweet tea. Then a left will take you to the interstate, but a right will take you right back here to me. And so Billy Currington goes on to sing about how disappointed he is that, you know, that the girl left, that he didn't try to make a move because, you know, for whatever reason he didn't make a move and he's disappointed and he's saying, oh man, it could have been love, but she's gone now. And so the chorus keeps saying, you got to stop and ask Miss Bell for some of her sweet tea. And at the end of the song, this is what he says. Says, is this Georgia Heat playing tricks on me? Or am I really seeing what I think I see? The woman of my dreams coming back to me. She went way up yonder past the caution light. Don't know why, but something felt right. When she stopped in and asked Miss Bell for some of her sweet tea, Mama gave her a big old glass and sent her right back here to me. Thank God for good directions and turnip greens. That's why I love country songs. They're all a story. They're all so good. This one's pretty funny. If you didn't catch on, in the chorus he says, "You better go, or you better stop and ask Miss Bell for some of her sweet tea." And all along, Miss Bell was his mom, and his mom sends the girl right back to him instead of sending her on her way, and he gets a second chance. And one of the reasons why I love that song is because Billy Currington said it right. And that is, you can't get where you're trying to go without good directions. And what's true for a country song is also true for us in life. And this is the main point that I want to make tonight. The main point that I want all of you guys to walk away with is this, is that your destination is determined by the direction in which you're headed. I want to say that again. Your destination is determined by the direction in which you're headed. So tonight I want to talk about some best practices when it comes to determining the direction of your life. And I think there's no better place to do that than from the book of Daniel and the life and the stories that we get from the book of Daniel. So just as kind of a prelude before we get into the scriptures, in 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar besieged the city of Jerusalem and took as captives some of the young men from the city, and specifically from the royal Israelite families, to serve in the king's palace. Daniel was one of those young men that was chosen to serve in the king's palace. And when he arrived in Babylon, he was given the name Belteshazzar. So we're not going to see that in the scriptures that we read, but if you're reading it on your own time, you'll see that Daniel refers to himself really in the book as Daniel, but then also as Belteshazzar, because that is the name that he was given. So if you guys have your YouVersion apps, now you can open those up to Daniel. We're going to be in chapter 1, verses 8 through 16. I've got my own Bible with me today. This is actually a very special Bible to me. This is my dad's old Bible. I've been reading out of it recently, and it's cool to see all of his old handwriting. So like I said, we're going to be in verses 8 through 16. And this is what it says. I'm reading out of the NIV. It says this: "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and goodwill with the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king." So Daniel said to the steward whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies, and as you see fit, so deal with your servants." So he consented with them in this manner, and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all of the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portions of delicacies and wine that they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. So from that passage, I want to bring out one major point and kind of break it up into a few smaller points. And the major point that I want to make from reading about Daniel eating vegetables is this: that obedience to God is always countercultural. Obedience to God is always countercultural. And that word countercultural just means going against the grain in which the world lives. And I mean a few things by that. One is that obedience to God makes us different and makes us go in a different direction. You know, it's no surprise to anybody that the world disagrees a lot with what the Bible has to say about a lot of different topics. And when we choose to obey God, we always head in a different direction than what the world says is okay. The world says it's okay to swear. and God says, that's not a good idea. The world will go on and, work and work and work and work, and God says, always take the day of Sabbath and rest yourself. Now, the world says a lot of other things when it comes to morality and comes to sexual ethics, and the Bible has a very countercultural view on all of those topics. And so when you follow God, you will almost always be going in the opposite direction of what the world is, of which way the world is going. And that's a good thing. And I think God oftentimes does that on purpose, because when he asks us to go in a different direction, we stand out. And when we stand out, people take notice. And when people take notice, then they wonder why we are doing what we are doing. And that gives us the opportunity to tell them and to show them about how good God is, and to show them how good God is by the way we are acting. It's almost like God's name, his goodness is glorified when we choose to walk a different direction. But following and obeying God always makes us look different, but that's a good thing. The second thing is this: obedience to God is for our good. When we choose to obey God, we are doing it obviously because we should obey God, and because when he gives us rules, we should follow them, just the same way that when your parents gives you rules, you follow them. But God doesn't give us these rules because he just wants to be in control. God doesn't give us these rules because he just wants to take the fun out of our lives. God gives us rules because he wants what's best for us. I've heard people say that when God gives them or when God gives somebody rules, they whine and complain and say, well, why can't we just do what we want and have a little bit of fun? But then I've heard people say, well, when you go to Home Depot and you buy a new chainsaw, and the chainsaw comes with a set of directions, like don't operate a chainsaw with bare feet, or don't touch the blade of touch the moving blade of a chainsaw. You don't see people whining and complaining to the chainsaw company saying, well, why can't we just do what we want and have fun? The rules are there for our own good, and God doesn't do them because he just wants to suck the fun out of our lives. God does these things because he loves us and he wants what's best for us. Sorry, my phone went off. And the third point that I want to make here is that obedience to God in small things prepares us for bigger things. This seems like such a small little thing. Daniel's eating vegetables. He walks into a new place and he sees what's on the menu is not what he is supposed to be eating. And it would be super easy for Daniel to just say, you know what, I'm in a new place, everybody else is doing it, it's such a small little thing, so why don't I just give it a go? But Daniel had convictions. He knew what God said in the Old Testament law, and he followed it, even though it was a tiny little thing. But in the long term, it made a huge difference, because what Daniel's actions showed God was that God can trust him with so much more. And as you continue to read the book of Daniel, you see how much more favor Daniel gets. And he goes through some hard times, but he gets a countless number of blessings because he obeys God in small little things, and God trusts him with more because he was faithful with the little that he had. So as we move on to our next scripture here, as if you were to continue reading, you'd see that later in Daniel's life, he gains the favor and the respect of King Nebuchadnezzar because of the gifts that God had given him to interpret dreams. And then this favor that he has with King Nebuchadnezzar continues on to Nebuchadnezzar's son, Belshazzar, when he takes the throne. And his favor even continues on past Belshazzar to King Darius of Persia, who winds up slaying Belshazzar, the king of Babylon. And once Belshazzar is slain by King Darius and the Persians take over the Babylonian Empire, Daniel maintains his position as one of the most powerful men in the empire. And there are other administrators in the Persian Empire who see Daniel getting all of this, and they become very jealous because of all the things that Daniel had been given. And so inspired by this, or because of this, the other administrators form a plot to take Daniel's life and to kill him. And so what we see is that, sorry, switching my notes, dropping my notes. What we see is that they encourage King Darius of the Persian Empire to make a decree or a law that says that everybody in the empire is no longer allowed to pray to anyone except for King Darius for 30 days because they know of Daniel's devotion to God and they want to get him killed. And so we pick up the story now in Daniel chapter 6. We're going to read just chapter 6 and verse 10. And it says this. It says, Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with his windows open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. So, the point I want to make from this is that going a different direction than the world means responding a different way. You know, if you know the rest of the story, then you know that Daniel, moving on from here, gets thrown into the lion's den. You know, but God ultimately saves him. But the biggest point that I want to make here is that following God's direction doesn't mean that you won't ever have trouble. But what it does mean is that even when there's trouble around you, there doesn't have to be trouble in you. And that's kind of the landing point that I want to get to and kind of sit on for all of you guys to realize, is that when we choose to obey God, when we follow God's directions, not only is there promises in the scriptures that he tells us and promises to us that we will have these blessings if we listen in these certain ways, but it's also, and not only is it for our own good, but ultimately the reason I believe why God gives us directions, why he points us in certain ways and asks us to obey certain things, is ultimately because what he's trying to form inside of us is a heart that trusts him, and a heart that loves him, and a heart that knows that he's good. So that when we go through troublesome times, when we go through situations that are difficult, when we lose somebody that we love, when there's something else going on in our lives that is difficult to handle emotionally or spiritually or mentally, that in those moments we don't have to respond in fear, that we don't have to curl up and just wait to get hit again. We don't have to stay on the mat. But in the middle of troublesome situations, in the middle of troublesome circumstances, when it feels like your enemies surround you, you know that there's peace inside of you because God lives inside of you. And that ultimately is what I believe why God gives us these instructions. So that even when there is trouble all around you, there is not trouble inside of you. Because that union, that friendship, that relationship with God that has been forged and that is trustworthy and that is reliable, that's what carries you through. So I just want to, as we close, I just want to thank you guys once again for tuning in. If you haven't been following along with us the last few weeks, we are going to be continuing another devotional series this week. So if you're friends with Andrea on the YouVersion app, make sure you send her a message or text her or send her a Facebook message. Ask her to invite you to this week's devotional series. And we encourage you guys to read along with us, comment with us every day, comment on each other's comments. We love to see that interaction. We love you guys. We thank you guys for tuning in, and we hope that you have a great week. And stay tuned for some big news coming soon. Thanks, guys.